Please make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you ever want to know who truly loves you, don't look at how they treat you in public, watch how they act when they think you're not watching. I had been married to Raymond for 17 years. 17 years of birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners, and seemingly, love. Or so I thought. I was a woman of quiet means. I never boasted, never flaunted, never even wore my wealth. Most people, including my husband, thought my money was from a family trust, dripped in tiny installments. No one knew I owned 5 corporations, including one that quietly bought out his tech startup years ago to save him from bankruptcy. Raymond never knew. Because I never told him. But a month before Christmas, while I was in the kitchen baking his favorite almond croissants, I overheard something I was never supposed to hear. It was his voice, whispering on the phone. And what I heard next shattered everything. I'll wait until after the holidays. Once she signs those final papers, I'll have access to half. She won't even see it coming. Then, laughter. His laughter. That day, something inside me didn't just break, it transformed. And just like that, I smiled, wiped the flour off my hands, and began planning the most silent revenge I'd ever imagined. A week later, my $500 million fortune was gone, moved, secured, and locked far away from the man who thought he could outplay me. Now let me tell you exactly how it all happened. They say love is blind. But in my case, it was deaf too, until the walls of my home decided to betray the silence. It started on an ordinary Thursday morning. The type of morning where the sun hit the window just right, the scent of vanilla and butter curled through the air, and you believed, foolishly, that everything was perfect. I was in the kitchen wearing my oldest house robe, the one with the faded roses. Flour dusted my palms. I was smiling to myself, humming old Nina Simone. Raymond was supposed to be upstairs on a business call. But I could hear him. More clearly than he ever intended. She's comfortable, gullible. After all, she's never questioned a thing in 17 years. The lawyer said once she signs the annual estate revision, I'll be positioned to walk away with half, maybe more if she doesn't fight. I froze. Not from the cold, but from the heat of betrayal crawling up my spine like fire ants. Half of what? My hand tightened around a rolling pin. My heart thudded, but I kept my face calm. I continued rolling, pretending I hadn't just heard the man I shared a bed with plotting his escape like a prisoner with a plan. But he wasn't escaping prison. He was escaping me, and aiming to leave with a fortune I built before he ever learned how to pronounce venture capital. What he didn't know. He was 5 years too late. I had already sensed something changing. Something cold in his kisses. Absent in his gaze. But I had given him the benefit of the doubt. Until now. That day, I put on the greatest performance of my life. I kissed him when he came downstairs. I smiled. I even handed him a warm croissant, golden and buttery. Just the way he liked it. He didn't suspect a thing. But inside, the countdown had begun. I didn't sleep that night. Lying next to Jonathan, pretending everything was normal, took every ounce of strength I had. I listened to his steady breathing, wondering if he had any clue I had seen it, the email. It hadn't been intentional. I wasn't snooping. But when a phone buzzes at midnight and lights up the entire room, and the screen shows final draft of divorce settlement review ASAP. You don't ignore that. Especially not when it's addressed to your husband. I waited until the next morning, pretending to be asleep while he got ready for work. He leaned over, kissed my forehead, like everything was fine, and left in a rush, like he always did lately. Once I was alone, I opened his laptop. I didn't want to. But I had to. If I was being ambushed, I needed to know what kind of war I was walking into. I found the email. Subject: Dissolution Agreement, Confidential. From his lawyer, one I recognized from a cocktail party months ago, the kind who smiled too hard. The email outlined everything. I would get the Aspen house. I would keep one car. Monthly alimony, capped for 18 months. Business shares. 0. Offshore assets. Not even mentioned. The kicker. There was a line in the draft. Mrs. Harwood was not actively involved in the accumulation of business wealth and has no legal claim to Harwood Tech IP or overseas holdings. Not involved. Was this a joke? I built the foundation of Harwood Tech. While Jonathan was still pitching investors in our basement, I was running marketing, staffing early hires, even ghostwriting pitches. I gave up my career. I gave up everything. And now, he wanted to erase me like I was a shadow. I called only one person that day, Princess. Princess was my lawyer before she was my friend, and she was the kind of woman who wore stilettos in the courtroom like armor. You need to move. Quietly, she said after hearing everything. Do not confront him. Not yet. I knew what that meant. Protect your money. Protect yourself. And most importantly, make sure when he fires his shot, it's already too late. That day, I made calls. I met with private bankers I hadn't spoken to in years. I started rerouting funds. Slowly. Carefully. Strategically. I had assets he didn't even know existed. Accounts in my maiden name. Stocks from my father's estate. Trusts with my name tucked in the fine print. For years, I hadn't touched them. Out of trust. Out of love. But now I saw exactly what that love had been worth to him. So, I called them back to life. And that was the day the plan began. A quiet war. No threats. No screaming. Just a woman reclaiming her empire. I didn't sleep for 2 days straight. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Edward's voice in my head. I saw his face as he whispered to his lawyer about clearing things up quickly before she gets wise. That wasn't just betrayal, that was war. I needed to act fast, but I needed to act smart. The first step. I played the role. The loving, clueless wife. I brought him breakfast in bed. I asked him about his meetings. I even arranged a weekend getaway to Napa, which he, of course, declined, citing too many business commitments. Fine. I didn't want romance. I wanted time. While he was at one of his commitments, I met with my private financial advisor, Marta. She had been handling a discreet offshore portfolio I created years ago, one I never included in our joint records. Move it all. Liquidate every investment. Transfer it to the vault accounts in Luxembourg and Zurich. Freeze the trust shares temporarily, I'll unlock them after next week. Marta blinked. All of it. Even the domestic holdings. I nodded. Everything with my name on it. We sever my name from the joint entities by Thursday. I'll deal with the legal noise after. She hesitated for a second before asking gently, You sure you want to go scorched earth? Not scorched earth, Marta, I said with a smile. Just arid enough that he has nothing left to burn. By the following Monday, my financial presence in our shared estate had quietly vanished like smoke. The $500 million fortune that funded Edward's empire, the reason I'd spent 15 years building and expanding our luxury chain, was now firmly in my hands alone. I was still technically married, but I was no longer financially tethered. And he had no clue. Then came the icing. I contacted Edward's assistant and told her I wanted to plan a surprise lunch meeting for him at the firm. She was thrilled. He's been under stress lately, she said. He'll love this. Oh, I was counting on it. The day of the meeting, I dressed to command. Sleek navy suit, sharp heels, simple pearls. Not flashy. Not trying too hard. Just powerful. I walked into the boardroom at noon. Edward's face paled the second he saw me. He wasn't expecting me at all. You didn't tell me, he stammered. I know, I interrupted calmly. That's what makes it a surprise. I watched his eyes dart toward the exit. Good. Let him feel the trap closing in. I brought something for you, I said, sliding a red envelope across the table. He opened it slowly. Inside was a printed list of all assets I'd quietly pulled from under his feet, every account, every trust, every share in the firm we co-owned. And beneath that list, one sentence. By the time you finish reading this, I'll own the only key to the kingdom you tried to steal. He froze. Divorce? I said, raising a brow. You should have gone first class. But you chose sneaky. And now? You get nothing. He stood up abruptly. You can't just walk away with everything. I can. And I already have. I turned to leave, then added without looking back, check with your lawyer. He's probably still reeling from his assistant sending me the recording of your little confession lunch. His breath hitched. Oh, right, I said, pausing in the doorway. You didn't know she was my cousin, did you? His legs gave out. He collapsed back into the chair. When I saw her, I didn't flinch. It was a Friday evening, golden sunlight pouring through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the glass floors. I had just returned from the Monaco office, where I'd finalized the last of my offshore asset transfers, when I heard muffled laughter from the hallway. His laughter. Followed by hers. I didn't recognize the voice at first. It was soft. Giggly. Young. When I stepped into the living room, I saw them sitting on the couch, Chase, in his favorite navy-tailored shirt, and the young brunette perched beside him, practically in his lap, sipping wine from our wedding crystal. He looked up, startled. She turned, confused. Oh, she said with a half-smile. You didn't say your maid was this pretty. I stared at her. Then at him. His face turned pale. She's not the maid, he muttered. My voice was calm. No. I'm the wife. But only for 5 more days. Her jaw dropped. Chase stood, reaching for me, but I held up a hand. I'm not here to fight, I said, coolly. I just came to collect the last of my things. He tried to speak, but his mouth faltered. I turned to the girl. He probably told you I was cold. Controlling. A business-obsessed woman who forgot how to love. I stepped closer, my heels clicking like gunshots on marble. But he didn't tell you who funded his last 2 businesses. Who paid off the $4.2 million lawsuit? Or who owns this penthouse? Her mouth twitched. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the leather couch. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, I cut in. He wanted it that way. I turned to Chase. You told me you needed more time to reconnect with yourself. That you wanted a few weeks apart to think. I stepped even closer now, so he could see the fury behind my lashes. But really, you were just trying to find the best time to serve me divorce papers and walk away with half of my empire. He opened his mouth again. I didn't let him speak. Too bad, Chase, I whispered. I moved it all. Every last dime. His face turned grey. You won't get a penny. Then I handed him an envelope. Inside, the prenup, an updated divorce agreement, and a list of everything I now owned in full, without his name anywhere near it. I left you the yacht, I said as I turned to go. But it's in dry dock and uninsured. Just like your future. As I stepped into the elevator, I saw her looking at him, not with love, but with horror. And it thrilled me. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because what Chase didn't know was that I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was going to expose him. His secrets, his frauds, the offshore accounts he never told the government about. And I wasn't doing it alone. I had help. From someone he never expected. I wore red that morning, the kind of red that commands attention without begging for it. I wasn't dressing for him. I was dressing for war. When William came down for breakfast, he was humming. Humming. As if he hadn't spent the past 2 months meticulously crafting my downfall behind closed doors. His favorite omelette was already on the table, one last courtesy from the wife he thought was still in the dark. You seem in good spirits, I said calmly, sipping my coffee. Can't complain, he said, settling into his chair. Life's looking up. He didn't even look at me. But I was watching him. Studying every smug movement. That morning, I had 3 calls lined up after he left, my estate attorney, my new private banker, and the CEO of a private island firm in Belize. He had no idea I'd sold all my silent shares. No clue that I'd already liquidated 2/3 of our joint assets into a protected trust, one he could never touch. And the kicker? I wasn't leaving him. He was going to leave me, or so he thought. That's what he'd planned all along, a blindsiding divorce after the holidays, with a legal team ready to paint me as mentally unstable. He'd even gone so far as to visit my childhood therapist to gather dirt. The betrayal was staggering. But I didn't cry anymore. I just planned smarter. At 3:45 p.m., he received an alert. I know because I was standing near the study when his phone buzzed. His voice dropped to a tense whisper. What do you mean the accounts are frozen? No, she can't do that. We had a prenup. I heard the chair scrape the floor violently. Footsteps. Then the door flung open. You moved the money. His eyes were wild. Desperate. I looked up from my tablet, perfectly calm. I did. You can't just take everything. That's, God, Eliza, this is insane. I stood slowly, walked over to the window, and watched the frost form delicate spiderwebs on the glass. I didn't take everything, I said softly. I just took back what was always mine. And as for the prenup, you might want to reread Clause 17. The one about breach of fidelity and intent to defraud. His lips parted, speechless. Yes, William, I knew about your affair. The young intern with the law degree you kept insisting was just helping you with research. I knew about the shell company you tried to siphon funds through. And I knew, down to the hour, when you planned to file for divorce. But I was always 5 steps ahead. It was the last Sunday in December, and I hosted what I called our Last Supper, though Michael, of course, had no idea just how final it would be. I cooked his favorite meal. Rosemary lamb, truffle risotto, and a chocolate souffle I hadn't made since our anniversary 5 years ago. Everything was perfect, from the playlist humming softly in the background to the 1982 Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion. He walked in, lips curled in that smug grin he wore when he thought he was in control. "What's all this for?" "Our marriage," I said with a smile. "Or what's left of it." He chuckled nervously but said nothing. I watched his eyes shift toward his phone, as if expecting a message. From her, no doubt. The paralegal. Or maybe it was the new real estate agent he was secretly taking to Turks and Caicos next month, under my dime, or so he thought. We ate slowly. I asked him about his day. He lied. I asked about the renovations on the condo I knew he had secretly bought under a shell company. More lies. "Funny thing," I said, swirling my wine. "Do you believe people get what they deserve, Michael?" He paused. "I believe, if you work hard enough, you get rewarded." Interesting. I used to think that, too. But I've come to learn that betrayal has its own reward. I smiled wider. You just don't get to choose when it's delivered. He laughed, confused. "You okay, Elena?" I reached into my purse and placed a slim envelope in front of him. "What's this?" he asked. "The reward you've been working for." He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't divorce papers. Not yet. It was the final transaction from our Cayman Islands trust. I had moved every last cent, all $500 million, into a private account, secured under my birth name, out of reach from any joint claim. The accompanying statement read, "Authorized by Elena Moore, sole trustee." His hands trembled. What the hell is this?" "I moved the money, Michael. Last week, while you were on the phone with the attorney you think I don't know about. You're not getting a penny. You can't." "I just did." He shot up from the table, panicked. "You think you can just erase me? After everything I've done for you? You mean like how you plan to divorce me and claim half my estate based on our prenup loophole?" "Michael, I designed that prenup. With my lawyer. You never read the fine print, because you never thought I was smarter than you." His eyes burned with fury. "You'll regret this." I stood slowly. "No. You will. But not tonight." As I walked toward the door, I stopped and turned. "I have a private dinner tomorrow. With your investor, Thomas Grant. He's switching allegiance. Something about wanting to partner with people who don't lie to their wives and bankrupt their own marriage. Guess what else? I'm buying you out of your own company." The silence was beautiful. I walked past the tall glass windows of the courtroom, my heels echoing like thunder on the polished marble floor. The same courtroom where my husband once thought he'd walk away with half my empire. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so tragic. A month had passed since the final hearing. He looked so smug then, so certain that the papers he'd secretly drafted would be my undoing. That he'd get the house, the private jet, maybe even a chunk of the tech company I built. But as he sat there, staring across the table at my attorneys, I dropped the bombshell. Calmly. Quietly. Legally flawless. I no longer own the company, I had said, sliding a folder across the table. I transferred it to a trust, irrevocable. 1 week before your private investigator thought he caught me unaware. He went pale. All he could say was, You knew. I smiled then, a small, controlled smile. I always knew. It wasn't just the business I protected. It was the future of the people who helped me build it. The engineers, the researchers, the women I mentored, who watched me rise from sleeping in my car to becoming one of the wealthiest self-made women in the country. My husband. He saw me only as a stepping stone. A way to retire rich, fly private, and rebrand himself as the ex-husband of a tech mogul. But I had rewritten the ending. The divorce was finalized. He walked away with a modest settlement, enough to keep him from whining, but far from the windfall he'd schemed for. He even tried to appeal. The judge didn't waste a minute dismissing it. As I stepped into my black SUV outside the courthouse, my driver, Mara, a woman I promoted from intern to head of logistics, opened the door with a grin. She knew what had just happened. Where to now? She asked. I glanced at my phone. I had a meeting in Lagos next week. A summit in London after that. The world was still spinning, and my empire was still growing. Home, I said. Let's go home. And as the city lights blurred past the tinted windows, I felt no sadness. Only clarity. Because I had learned something powerful. Never wait to be blindsided. Always move before they do. And when you control your empire, no one can take it from you, not even the man who once swore he loved you.